China, the big bad boogeyman for the West, leads the world in clean energy production. Contrary to the image we're supposed to have of them from all the Red Scare propaganda and xenophobic fear-mongering. Once seen as a major polluter, China has, in recent decades, implemented a rapid transition to clean energy, away from fossil fuels. This monumental transformation is happening even as Western sanctions and tariffs on Chinese renewable products threaten to stall this critical progress. In this video, we'll take a look at China's remarkable journey, explain why this all happened, and discuss the crucial role China plays in the fight against climate catastrophe. But before we do, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank our channel sponsor, Aura. As you all know, we make political content here and on our other channels. Unfortunately, that means some people don't like us very much. These days, a quick Google search is all it takes to find someone's personal information. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all readily available for those who want to find it. That's why I've been using Aura to help keep my private details private. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. This not only cuts down on the amount of spam I get, but also helps keep all my accounts safe from bad actors. I'll give you a real-world example. AT&T recently revealed that over 73 million customer records, both existing and former customers, were released on the dark web. They recommended that those affected change their passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. This was a huge breach, but I don't have to worry. Aura does all of this for me. And best of all, I don't have to download a bunch of different apps just because some company couldn't keep my data secure. I value my privacy, and I'm sure you value yours. You can go to aura.com/firstthought to start your 2-week free trial, no strings attached. Try it out, and I promise you'll appreciate the peace of mind. Support the show and protect your valuable data by signing up today at the link below. The foundation for China's remarkable economic ascent was built on Mao's industrialization policies of the 1950s through the 70s, but it really took off in the 1980s, transforming an impoverished agricultural nation into an industrial powerhouse within just a few decades, an unprecedented achievement given its vast population of 1.4 billion people. China's rapid growth has puzzled Western economists, who genuinely believe free market capitalism to be the most effective approach. This swift transformation is a testament to the success of the Chinese model of economic development, exemplified by significant state intervention and planning, two of the scariest things to Western politicians. By 2016, China's per capita income had surged, and the country had become the world's largest manufacturer, producing nearly 50% of the world's major industrial goods, including crude steel, cement, and coal. It shouldn't come as a surprise that these advances also landed them the number 2 spot, earning the title of the world's second largest economy. This staggering growth placed China far ahead of many developed nations in industrial output and innovation. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. As China has industrialized, it has picked up not only the positives of Western-style development, but also the negatives. Rising divorce and suicide rates, widespread business fraud and scandals, and pervasive asset bubbles. It also came with an arguably far higher cost, a severe environmental crisis. The environmental impact of China's industrialization was profound. Studies conducted in Zhuzhou City revealed significant pollution from heavy metals in air, water, and soil. Heavy metals from industrial waste were found to settle in the sediment of the Xiang River, causing inconsistent changes in concentrations over time. This pollution had significant implications for both the environment and public health, as heavy metals which enter the food chain lead to severe health problems. The primary pollutants, including cadmium, lead, copper, and zinc, were largely attributed to concentrated industrial activities. Vegetables absorbed heavy metals more easily than rice, but the concentration of heavy metals in both was higher than the edible standard and background value. Like other economic powers, China's environmental challenges have not been isolated. The global nature of its economic activities means that pollution and environmental degradation have far-reaching consequences. This is a critical consideration as China continues to play a central role in the global economy, influencing environmental policies and practices worldwide. While the US continues to roll back environmental protections under both Republican and Democrat leadership, China's approach to climate change is refreshingly ambitious, and they've been meeting or exceeding many of their pledged goals. The Chinese government has officially recognized climate change as a significant threat and has set comprehensive goals to address it, something not typically seen among Western nations where there's still a debate as to whether or not it's happening during yet another hottest year on record. In September 2020, President Xi Jinping announced China's aim to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060, which has and will require substantial changes in the country's economic and energy infrastructure. This goal has been supported by numerous policies designed to reduce emissions and promote low-carbon technologies. From 2019 to 2021, China led the world in new solar, wind, and hydropower projects, as well as in the production and sales of electric vehicles and deployment of nuclear power plants. China's 1+N policy framework includes long-term plans, such as the 14th Five-Year Plan for a Modern Energy System and the Action Plan for Carbon Dioxide Peaking before 2030, which emphasize scaling up clean energy sources and investing in future industries. The country is currently providing the world an excellent example of what serious state-level climate action looks like. They engage in real diplomacy aimed at addressing real problems and implement robust, effective policies. Because of this approach, China is positioning itself as a global leader in renewable energy deployment and climate change mitigation. Over the last few years, China has consistently topped global rankings for new renewable energy capacity, underscoring its commitment to sustainable energy sources. The country's advancements in energy storage and grid infrastructure have been pivotal, enabling the efficient integration of renewable energy into the national grid and enhancing energy security. A major part of their technological dominance comes in the form of their electric vehicle investment. China has made significant strides in EVs. In 2022, a quarter of all new cars purchased in China were electric or plug-in hybrids, supported by a vast network of over 4 million charging stations. This rapid adoption is driven by extensive government subsidies, long-term investments, and a robust infrastructure that supports these cars. A comprehensive approach that's unthinkable in the West. Chinese companies like BYD and CATL are global leaders in EV and battery technology, innovative features, and market share. Chinese domestic manufacturers have been particularly aggressive in integrating new technologies into their vehicles, such as advanced entertainment features and voice-activated controls, making Chinese EVs highly competitive globally. There's a reason the West, especially the US, puts such absurd tariffs and import restrictions on Chinese cars. Why would anyone buy a $100,000 domestic car when a Chinese model vastly outcompetes it in specs and price? Despite the popularity of electric cars, China's public transport sector also showcases significant technological advancements. China leads in the adoption of electric buses, with cities like Shenzhen achieving 100% electric bus fleets in 2017, 7 years ago at time of writing. This transition has set a high and necessary bar for urban transport electrification. The majority of the world's electric buses operate in China, which has led to a massive reduction in urban air pollution and greatly enhanced public transport sustainability. And now we come to one of the more controversial clean energy alternatives. We're talking, of course, about nuclear energy. And here again, China is making substantial progress, currently constructing about a third of the world's new nuclear power capacity, a massive long-term investment in energy diversification. This clearly demonstrates that they aren't focused on short-term financial gains, but rather are building for the future. The expansion in nuclear energy complements China's renewable energy efforts by providing a stable and low-carbon energy supply to support its long-term climate goals. In general, the renewable sector has been a major positive in the Chinese economy, benefiting from a surge in government stimulus as Beijing recovered from the effects of COVID-19. China's dedication to combating climate change extends to its active participation in global climate agreements. Their pledged commitments under the Paris Agreement are significant, aiming to peak carbon dioxide emissions by 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. China's nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, reflect a genuine ambition to reduce carbon intensity and increase the share of non-fossil fuel energy sources. In 2021, in the Paris Agreement commitments that China submitted to the UN, Beijing pledged to strictly limit coal growth, strictly control new coal power, reduce energy and carbon intensity by 2025, increase the share of non-fossil energy sources to 20% by 2025 and 25% by 2030, and to generate 50% of the increase in energy use from 2020 to 2025 from renewable sources. Through these international commitments and proactive policies, China is not only addressing its domestic energy needs, but also contributing significantly to global efforts to mitigate climate change. Now that we've looked at a successful approach which is making a meaningful impact on climate change, let's look at the West and see how they're approaching apocalyptic, irreversible climate change. If political rhetoric is to be believed, it must be better than China, right? Let's start with the United States. The approach in the world's richest and most powerful country primarily relies on profit-driven market solutions for the clean energy transition and climate change mitigation. Unfortunately, we can all see how that's going. Despite significant technological advancements on paper, the pace of adoption and implementation is too slow to meet the urgent demands of climate change happening right now. The reliance on the private sector has not been transformative, as evidenced by the unimpressive increase in renewable energy adoption and the continued high levels of total emissions. This is the key failure of the capitalist model. When the choice is between more profit now and sustainable profits later, the short term always wins out, regardless of the consequences. The American approach is destined for failure. Relying only on the goodwill and initiative of the rich, it must somehow contend with entrenched low-cost energy infrastructure, the high cost associated with a rapid transition, and resistance from established industries. Additionally, there are financial barriers to investing in emerging technologies, especially in developing countries and among lower-income households. Policy changes such as increased investment in scientific research, ending fossil fuel subsidies, and introducing carbon pricing are necessary, but have been met with significant political resistance and are unlikely to be implemented in the time frame required. And according to many experts, we're already past that window. This profit-driven model, heavily influenced by elite economic interests and the fossil fuel lobby, has caused a slow adoption of renewables. The American approach is further undermined by the lack of comprehensive and cohesive national policies. Because what good is freedom if you can't refuse to cooperate? State-level initiatives vary widely, leading to an inefficient patchwork of regulations that are often inconsistent and insufficient. This fragmented approach to policy, coupled with reliance on the invisible hand of the market and decentralized, often childishly obstinate state government to address a global crisis requiring unified and decisive action is, to put it lightly, only a little less useless than plugging your ears and pretending climate change isn't happening, which some states also do. Next, we'll look at the European Union, United States Light. Fewer calories, same support for genocide. The EU has adopted a regulatory and policy-driven approach to clean energy and climate change, aiming for climate neutrality by 2050. This approach is far better than the US's, as it relies on comprehensive legislative frameworks and international cooperation, with significant financial investments required from member states. The EU's energy sector, responsible for over 75% of its greenhouse gas emissions, is undergoing a substantial transformation to achieve a net zero economy. However, this approach has its own drawbacks, especially for a loose federation like the EU. The financial burden placed on member states and the uneven implementation of policies across the Union are significant obstacles. The ambitious targets set by the EU require coordinated efforts from all member states, which has proven to be a complex and often contentious process. This mirrors some of the challenges the US is facing. It turns out that implementing large-scale environmental policies within a diverse political and economic union is difficult to say the least. What's more, the EU's approach exacerbates economic disparities between member states. Wealthier countries are better equipped to make the necessary investments and adjustments, while poorer nations struggle to meet the same standards without significant external support. And unfortunately for them, their fellow member states aren't helping. So, despite being a collection of the richest and most powerful nations on Earth, built upon centuries of domination and their own heavily polluted past, the West is not only failing to implement policies, they are functionally and technologically years behind China, a country that is routinely criticized for not doing enough about climate change by these very same countries. And it's not just words. The Western powers are actively trying to undermine China's progress. The West, particularly the United States and the European Union, have imposed significant sanctions and tariffs on Chinese renewable products. These actions, framed as efforts to ensure fair trade, greatly hinder the fight against climate change. The United States and the EU have established numerous trade barriers against Chinese renewable energy products, which have and will continue to disrupt the global supply chain. Since 2011, the number of trade restrictions, like anti-dumping and countervailing duties, has jumped from 1 to 16, with many more on the way or expected. Anti-dumping duties are imposed when a foreign company sells a product in the US at a price lower than it costs to produce, while countervailing duties are added to offset the benefits that Chinese manufacturers get from government subsidies. These duties range from 18.32% to a whopping 250% for anti-dumping, and from 14.78% to 49.79% for countervailing. These high tariffs are, among other things, meant to make Chinese solar panels more costly in the US, which is meant to hurt China's solar industry in order to boost adoption of domestically manufactured panels, which wouldn't be so bad if the US actually pushed for adoption of these domestic products instead of backing fossil fuels to the hilt. Similarly, the European Union has imposed heavy duties on solar glass imports from China, Malaysia, and Taiwan. The truth of the matter is that China leads the world in solar panel production. By 2025, it's expected that China will control almost 95% of the global production of key solar panel components. Over the last decade, China has invested over $50 billion in solar manufacturing and created about 300,000 jobs in the sector, far outpacing investments from Europe and the United States. Chinese government policies have been crucial in driving this growth, rather than the barrier that many critics claim. Regardless, one would assume the capitalist powers would welcome competition, as that is their stated philosophy. It would appear that only applies when they can win. These Western-imposed sanctions and tariffs obviously have serious implications and consequences for global climate goals. Accelerating the adoption of renewable energy is crucial for cutting emissions, and a recent study shows that renewables and energy efficiency measures could meet 90% of emission reduction needs by 2050. Renewable energy is expected to be the largest source, requiring an annual increase of about 1.2%, a rate much faster than what we've seen recently. Fully utilizing renewable energy options would significantly cut emissions, achieving a 15% reduction by 2030 compared to the current path. This would align with the EU's goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030, and help meet the Paris Agreement's targets. However, Western sanctions and tariffs make this goal nearly impossible to reach, revealing their total disregard for the greatest existential threat humanity has ever faced. China has emerged as a crucial and effective player in the fight against climate change. Their progress has been driven by a series of exceptionally successful 5-year plans which have allowed China to make the necessary vast investments in clean energy technology and to set ambitious yet attainable climate goals, even exceeding some years ahead of schedule. These plans have facilitated the rapid development of solar, wind, and hydropower, making China the global leader in renewable energy production. This success stands in stark contrast to the fragmented and lackluster efforts seen in the West, where policy inconsistency and lack of coordinated action hinders progress. China's ability to exceed their own goals, as well as those outlined by international agreements like the Paris Accord, is evidence that they aren't just paying lip service to the crisis as the West does, which is extremely important if there's to be long-term progress. But beyond this, China has been able to show the world that it's possible to grow an economy and seriously tackle emissions while introducing cleaner solutions that don't rely on profit incentives. The success of the 5-year plans has also proved the necessity of large-scale government direction in order to accomplish a goal that the West wants you to believe can be solved by individuals buying a product with a green sticker on it. Unfortunately, myopic Western sanctions and tariffs on Chinese renewable products pose a serious threat to progress. Trade barriers not only undermine China's efforts, but also stall the global transition to clean energy, making it harder to meet international climate targets and avoid the most extreme climate fallout scenarios. The West's focus on protectionist measures over collaborative progress sabotages the desperately needed united front against climate change. But despite the challenges posed by Western sanctions, China stands poised to lead the global community in addressing climate change and securing a sustainable future for all of us. It's time that we in the West acknowledge that China isn't our enemy. It's simply an economic peer nation, and we could all benefit from the advances China has made if our own ruling class weren't so invested in the unsustainable status quo. Episodes like this one are made possible thanks to our generous patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the show and get some great perks while you're at it, consider becoming a patron. Perks include access to our Discord server, early access to videos, ad-free episodes, and more. You can help us keep the channel afloat by becoming a patron at patreon.com/firstthought. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.